The Eternal Student here, and today we'll be taking a brief detour through time to look at the history of economic thought. From our previous videos, we talked a little bit about what economics concerned itself with, namely as a choice between scarce resources. But when did economics actually start to become codified as an actual field of study? Is there a sole person responsible for inflicting this horrible subject upon the rest of us? Well, the origin of the word economics actually takes us back all the way to the ancient Greeks. It stems from the word oikonomia, which referred to the management of household affairs. This household management was concerned with how to run a household, which was understood to be composed of the landowner, his family, and his slaves. This is far from what we would call economics today. To look at the root of what we would call modern economics, we'll have to skip forward thousands of years to the 16th century. It was a time where most European countries had the bright idea of venturing outside their lands and setting up foreign colonies where they could control and monopolize foreign resources. Some examples of countries you might know as former colonies are the USA, India, and almost literally the entire world. At this time, the prevailing school of national policy was a theory called mercantilism. Mercantilism was how countries thought to become rich. It was based on the belief that a nation's wealth and power were determined by its accumulation of precious metals, such as gold and silver. It involved countries setting up colonies in foreign lands and siphoning the resources back to their home country. Additionally, because the primary goal of this policy was to increase the wealth of the home country, colonies were not allowed to trade with each other as well. Now we introduce Adam Smith, a man who hated mercantilism, not because he wished to defend the rights of the native populations who were being exploited, but because he simply thought it was a stupid, idiotic theory. In 1776, Adam Smith published a book known as The Wealth of Nations, widely regarded as one of the seminal works that laid the foundations for modern economics. In it, Smith rejected the idea that a nation's wealth was about how much gold it had, but rather, how much a country could produce. In the book, Smith presented various key ideas and advocated for a free market system with minimal government intervention, believing that competition and self-interest would lead to economic prosperity and growth. One of the key ideas was a metaphor called the invisible hand, where individuals pursuing their own self-interest in a free market economy unintentionally contribute to the overall good of society. For example, when suppliers compete, they will opt to provide the lowest possible price and highest possible quality, leading to good outcomes for consumers. Now, the Wealth of Nations was hugely influential and signaled the birth of classical economics, a school of economics that advocated for the free market and no government intervention. Thanks to the contributions of other economists in the 19th century, it would start to further develop into distinct areas of study, i.e. micro and macroeconomic theory. On the micro side, key economists such as John Stuart Mill introduced the use of utility as a concept for measuring individual happiness and pleasure, and theorized how individuals prioritize utility in order to make economic decisions. And on the macro side, economists such as Jean-Baptiste Say would develop the field of macroeconomics through theories such as Say's law, which can be explained by the phrase, supply creates its own demand. The idea is that when a supplier sells goods to households, they earn income, which they in turn spend on other goods. As you can see, this concept forms the basis of the circular flow of income model that we've already covered in a previous video. Now, free markets were creating incredible wealth around the world.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money. Money, money, money.
And yet, it was also leading to horrible inequality and exploitation. In the absence of government controls, capitalists were free to do as they wished to improve profits, which often meant exploiting their workers, either through unsafe working conditions, or literally by hiring the cheapest underage workers possible. A certain German philosopher by the name of Karl Marx noticed all of this. He noticed how property, which was concentrated in the hands of a few capitalists, also known as the bourgeois, often created incomes for their owners in the form of interest, rent, and profits. On the other hand, workers, who could only provide their labor, only earned wages. If wages were suppressed and workers were exploited, eventually, Karl Marx believed that capitalism would eventually lead workers to rise up and overthrow the ruling class.
Who's stronger, the bourgeois or the proletariat?
Well, if the bourgeois were at full power, it might be a little draining.
But would the proletariat lose?
No, they'd win.
At the start of the 20th century, Marxism spread like wildfire across the globe. Communism, the de facto implementation of Marxism, was eventually taken up by numerous countries all over the world, reaching from Asia to Africa and South America. However, by the end of the 20th century, few communist countries still remained. Why was this the case? Well, in Marx's theory, people could not be trusted to own property, and so Marx believed that government intervention was necessary to make sure that resources would be allocated evenly and fairly through what was called a command economy, where the government owned everything and was in charge of everything. Production which was non-crucial to the government's aims, like feeding starving children.
No.
Producing more weapons for national security reasons. Exploitation by the bourgeois was no longer possible. The hot new thing was to get exploited by the state instead. Just look at this wonderful picture of the USSR prisoners working together in solidarity to improve the infrastructure of the state. You can see how this may have caused issues and contributed to the downfall in popularity of communism.